What is shaking, y'all? It is episode 159 of The Golden Mike Live! Did you think that I was gonna change Lobsterbird? Same guy a year later! Same guy!
You got me. I'm so chill. I'm like, oh, he's doing his thing. Oh, wait, he's doing this.
She's like, dang! Happy Monday, y'all. It is not the 31st of May. I will change that date in a second. Sometimes in your life, there's people who you meet and you can like talk to them in like a
We're
minute.
passing.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, like you meet them
Yeah,
and
can you
like
hear me?
instantaneously you're like soul siblings. You're like you begin to meet in different cities at different things. And then when you talk, like you kind of get lost in this like crazy philosophical poetic waxing that you never kind of forget about, and it just kind of changes the way that you live your life. This is one of those people that I've had the pleasure of calling a soul sister as I've gone on my intergalactic journey over the past year. Someone who's definitely made me better and made a lot of people more aware of what's going on in the journey, more aware of what's going on, maybe in terms of dispelling some illusions. Someone who's written multiple books, multiple bestsellers. She's like shocked now that I'm going to scream at any point. She's like sitting in her seat. Multiple books. I think it started out with, was it Phase Out or Level Up?
Phase out.
Started with Phase Out, then Level Up. Created this program about two and a half years ago called The Hero's Way, which is literally about going on pilgrimage and continuing to like outperform what you think you can do, right? And so last year, if you missed it, we had this amazing conversation about her books, The Hero's Way. And now all of a sudden she's going into this other form of entrepreneurship, The Bridge to Being, and also a television show she's working on called Modern Magic. I wish that I was surprised, but I am not. I am not surprised that all of this stuff is happening for you. Please welcome back the amazing Lobsterbird. Lobsterbird, how are you today?
Yay! I'm just gonna do a little Muppet flail for you. Little.
Like last year when we started off, you're doing these like dance moves like from like your dance days. I was like, dang, that was like the best intro ever. That was the most disruptive intro ever. That people probably stopped in their tracks to watch that. Lobsterbird, we've got a lot to talk about today because one of the big things, and for some reason, maybe it's because I've been calling this in my own life as I've kind of started turning my way back towards a spiritual path. I'll be the first to admit in the second season that playing the fool and wanting to reject spiritualism by only accepting the empirical data of positive psychology was something that was kind of a dark phase. And I'm looking forward to incorporating more spirituality in my own path, right? But there's a lot of folks nowadays who are taking spirituality and kind of merging it with personal journey as well as entrepreneurship. And so this is the discussion today that we're going to talk about. If you haven't met me, it's been 159 of these, so it's good to finally meet you after 159. My name is Mark Cordone. I'm the founder of Make Money Coaching. I'm also the co-founder of The Joy Revolution. But more importantly, boom, right? But more importantly, I get to ask my friends, I get to ask people on a regular basis two questions. It's the easiest job in the world and also the most profound. Number one, how happy are you today? And number two, how much do you feel like you're living in your meaning and purpose? So, Lobsterbird, Sophia, I've got the same question that I have for everybody else. How happy are you today? And how much are you living in your meaning and purpose?
No. Well, I am so happy today because I love you.
Oh, me
I'm
too.
so
Yeah.
happy to be here. And beyond that, I also like you. Thank you for sharing your journey,
Mhm.
and going, like for the hard data. And I also, I mean, I love science. A lot
Oh
of
yeah.
the work that I do is science based, and I think we're coming to a point where we're merging those two. And so this is actually an answer to the happiness question, because I think now I have a different understanding of what happiness is,
Mm.
having gone and studied it through psychology, and through science, and like how it functions in human beings and in groups, and then also, on the spiritual path and what is happiness. And so I would say that I am like transcendently happy, because every moment, like every moment, no matter what is going on, I know how to navigate and I know how to be present with. And I think that's really what happiness is. I think I am happy.
Yeah, or you just be happy, right?
Be happy.
Now, in terms of meaning, I've always wondered if you ever have been a if you ever were like a little lobster chicklet. A little lobster bird that was searching for meaning. To me, in my mind, you always have been a person who's pretty much lived in your purpose at the capacity that it was at the time. I don't know if that's true or not, because that's just the assumption that I fill in, based on what I know, and then I fill in the gaps with my own storytelling. But in terms of meaning and purpose, how would you describe it today?
Mm. Well, today it's interesting that you ask, because I am visiting my parents right now.
Oh,
So I'm in my childhood home, right? And all the memories are coming back, and the whole path that I've walked and where I started. It's all very present in me today. And I can say that right now, I feel incredibly connected to my purpose. I feel that I understand it more than ever. I feel that although it's not static, I'm getting more and more clarity about it each and every day.
yeah,
And it's evolving and transforming, and it's become this really fun dance with purpose rather
yeah,
than a finding of a purpose, right?
yeah.
But I also want to say thank you for that compliment, that it seems like I know what I've been doing
A little
this
lobster
whole past
chicklet.
time. But it's been a very windy path. And I think in the past I would have told you that I had strayed off my path for a long time, doing all these different things. But I've now come to the realization that all of those things were a part of the path. And without any one of them, I couldn't possibly be doing what I'm doing today. And so, yes, I've been connected with a sense of purpose, right? Like, I know, like, I was born on this planet, I feel like probably like a lot of your listeners, being like, I am here for a reason. I
Yeah,
will say, even it like veered a little towards like, I'm here to save the world, kind of like Jesus complex, which I've leveled out. Like, I was like, I am here for a reason. I know things, and I'm gonna help. I'm gonna help. That's like when I was little, right? I'm
yeah,
gonna help
yeah.
the situation, right? And now I feel as if I am actually doing something that's of service and of use to the world. So.
That's amazing. What's awesome is just like our lungs expanding and contracting. That's what purpose feels like. Like I think a lot of people think that it's rigid and static, right, and stays the same. But like you take your first breath and expansionism already happens, and that's the same thing with purpose. And then you may feel like it's diminishing at times, but that's just you're missing the spiral part of things, right? You spiral in and out of your purpose, right? And so I love that you can answer it from that kind of standpoint. I already feel a different energy since you and I talked. Not a good or a bad one, but it's been a year, and like I, my logical brain says, "Oh, we're older and wiser and blah 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 blah," but I don't know. Like, I think there's another layer of depth that we're already starting off with, right? And I love conversations like this where I get to take off like the fool in the king's court. Apparel that I sometimes wear for the show, and I just get to be myself, and that's one of the cool things that I love about being around you, Sophia, is that it's just we're always laughing, but it's always deep at the same time. What about you? In the past year, what's been going on? Because I'm gonna use the word that you always make fun of me for. Ostensibly, you've had all these great things happen. I mean, a television show, all these opportunities opening up. That's the external Sophia that we get to see. Internally, what's been going on? What's been shifting for you?
Oh my gosh. You are so tuned in, Mark. Intergalactic Mark. You're so tuned in. It is a year later. It has been a heck of a year. Anyone out there, like, we get an amen or a hell? It's actually a hell yeah, right? Because it was kind of hell in some parts, and yeah.
It's been hell and yeah.
This is hell yes. But it was an incredibly challenging year, and something, I sense your energy different too, and if I can kind of attempt to qualify it or quantify it or somehow describe like what I'm feeling between us, which is exciting to me, is that it feels like our energy is becoming more embodied, right? The things that we were like studying and learning and practicing and teaching and all of these things, it feels like they're dropping in. And to me, that's really exciting because I have some theories about this, which is about enlightenment, really, and about where we're going in human awakening and human consciousness. And it's super fascinating. I just want to say that thank you, first of all, because you are my first foray back out into the world and talking to people. Like, I stopped doing my own lives for a long time.
I noticed.
You
literally went off the grid for a little bit.
Yeah, I went off the grid, and you really are my first, you're bringing me back, so thank you. But I'll tell you why, is because it was an incredibly hard year where I realized a lot of truths about this world that we live in that were shocking, that it's hard to talk about because I don't want to use specific words, but it was really dark, for lack of a better word. There was a lot of darkness, and I was woken up to really what is going on in this world and why it's happening. And part of that answer is because it's an extension of what's happening within us, right? We know, we talked about this on the last time, we co-create our realities, right? So we have an active role in what it is that we're seeing around us. And so I went on a bunch of different pilgrimages, which I still maintain, fastest path to transformation, and also craziest path because I encountered things literally I thought were reserved for movies and fiction, and novels, things that were really happening that were mind-blowing and insane. And it led me to a deeper layer, like you said, of realizing how steeped in the illusions we are of this world, and how we're going to liberate ourselves, we have to cut through them. We have to see through them, and we have to embody the wisdom that we all have access to. Every single one of us. This is my whole new thing. And this is really what I learned. And I want to say this, it's in an experiential way, which I think is different, because I think, right now we have access to so much information and so much data, right? And we can turn that into knowledge. We can turn that into here, this is something we know about the world. This is something we know about illusion, right? This is something I know about myself, but only through experiencing it, really, and how it plays out is how it becomes actually, I think, embodied wisdom, And so I went through this really dark period, and it was around a lot of the things, I, for a long time, thought I was going to quit, actually, what I'm doing, because I only ever want to do something if I really, truly believe it's going to be of service and it's going to help people. And to be honest, I questioned that for the past year, and so I didn't stop. I have my League of Heroes who are my long-term, clients, and we've been going on these pilgrimages, and it's been insane and amazing. And also, heartbreaking. There was a lot of loss too, and that's what happens when we cut through the illusion, right? It's a loss process and a grieving process. And so I don't mean to be a big downer, but I will say it was incredibly hard. And I feel like that's how I can answer your question about happiness, because I was able to be really present through that in ways that I haven't before in my life, going through loss, right? Going through grief. These are cycles and patterns that we'll keep going through in our lives unless we clear them for ourselves. So on the flip side, right, now I actually know how we can clear these things on the deepest energetic levels, and that's where our liberation lies. That's where our freedom is. That's we talk about the system and going outside the system, but we can't do it unless we're doing it energetically. And so I now have this it's not even a thing. It's just like who I'm being. And I'm like constantly clearing. And I feel this real sense of my word for the year. Does anyone else have a word for the year? Do you have a word for the year?
Yeah, it's intergalactic.
Yeah. That's what I keep talking to
It never
you.
changes.
Well, my word of this year is sovereignty, and I really believe. So this is like my okay. Now I gotta like, get on my little soapbox here.
Get on it.
Because we're in a moment right now in history, in time. You can see it playing out on the world stage. You can see it playing out in your friends' lives. You can see it playing out in your own, probably, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we're in a transition right now, and things are crumbling. And it's like, it's written in the stars, astrologically speaking. We're in the same astrological signature as we were in the 1970s, which was like a huge time of revolution. And it only comes around, not that many years, a few decades later. There's some major things happening, but we can feel it also, I think, and experience it. And if you're like tuned into what's going on in the world, things are really changing. And so for me, I really believe that we need a new kind of leader to step up. And when I say leader, I mean many leaders. Actually, I mean like not in a hierarchy of leader. I think we need lots of leaders on different levels. We need them on the local community levels. We need them in the internet as like thought leaders, and we need them on the political level. We need new leaders everywhere, but it's a new kind of leader. And that's what I'm seeing that's really lacking right now. And so for me, part of why I'm excited is because I feel like through the work that's happening now, through clearing the illusion and clearing the energy in each one of us, that you're a coach. I know a lot of your audience is coaches, right? Anyone who's like a coach, a teacher, a healer, a thought leader, anyone who is helping other people, right, to like live better lives or to understand things differently. I think we need to up our game, because right now there's also an opportunity for us to really step up and really change the systems and change the way that things have been running. Every single one of us, and it doesn't matter what country you live in. Like, we're in the U.S. right now. We are also oppressed. I'm sorry, because we're living in freedom, right? But there's a lot of oppression that are going on, and and they're stopping us. And so, and this is what my eyes were open to over the past year. It was really how deep and really how pervasive they are. And I'm going to tell you, I was someone who did not want to see it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to admit it. I want everything to be love and light, because I think essentially like that's what everything is. And so I just focused on that, and I ignored this other part of things. And I just think for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the planet, I think we really need to open our eyes and see it and do something about it, and then step up in a new kind of leadership that actually allows people to become sovereign and become free. Yeah. That's the only way that we're going to change any of the world problems and or be happy.
Well, number one, I absolutely love that, because we're already in flow. But sort of, I think last time we talked a lot about sort of the Joseph Campbell model of journeymen and journeywomen, dumb, and I wanted to throw in Harmon's model, right, of storytelling, because what I really love about Harmon's model, which is very similar to Campbell's model, but it talks about how whenever we start any part of our life, we start at a status quo order, sort of the illusionary world we start at, right? And even if we think that we busted past all illusions, that's still a form of illusionary world that we're in. And then it talks about going into the darkness and into the chaos, right? And then when you come out of the chaos, you ain't the same again. You ain't the same. And while you were in that chaos, something was taken from you in order to receive that wisdom, And I do think that there's a certain nod that we're giving ourselves, both Intergalactic Cordon and Lobsterbird today, in which we're saying we both in some way went into that darkness this year, and we're coming out a little bit different. I don't want to say woke, but I want to say different, right? Some people might use the word woke, But now I'm returning back to the status quo, which I think is really hilarious because you and I are coming back to where it all started, right? On these golden mics and on, these shows and stuff. But there's something different. There's a message that we have, right? I'm breaking down my own character from last year and being like, yeah, that dude was a character, right? And then also at the same time, you're coming back saying, yo, I was blind to certain things. Now, I wanted to ask you, before we even talk about this, tricks and traps of sort of the business as a spiritual path, what are these elements of leadership that you feel that we need to evolve into in order to continue to play the game that our meat suits are playing right now? Like what are those elements that are that were nice adaptive qualities, but we need to practice them. All of us need to practice them at this point in order to adapt with this new kind of chaos that's coming on us.
It's a really good question. I feel like at some point I should write an article about this. But I can say
or book.
For now. Well, it's coming. I feel the third in the series. It's coming. It would take an entire book, I think, to really, unpack what I'm talking about. But I do believe that inherently in what the new leadership is, it is an ability, like you're saying, to be able to see through the illusion. I've been studying a lot and watching, and so I haven't been dead. Even though I haven't been showing up, anywhere and saying anything, I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of watching and witnessing and reading into the energy of things, and of people, and particularly of leaders, and really looking at what's going on. And I think the majority of the leaders who are in the world right now are still buying into the false illusion of reality. So I think the number one quality of a leader is that they don't do that. Mm-hmm. Right? And then the second quality is that not only are they, and so I like how you're talking about that word woke. And one of the things that it gets to me, and this is part of why I disappeared, is because one of the strongest parts of the false reality is the illusion of identity. Right? And so if I say, I'm woke, right? I've been doing the spiritual work. I'm woke. That's an identity I'm putting on myself, right? I'm a woke person. Instead, we're awakening as a verb. I think it's used as a noun, awoke, or an identity, woke person, then we're in another trap. We're in a trap right there, right? But we are in a process, I think, of awakening, me and you, and I'm sure all of your listeners, and the people in the world at large. We're in this process of awakening. And in this process, one of the things that I have seen in other leaders is that although their intentions are stated and seem all good, right? It seems like they're saying things that are good for people and for the planet. There is a crisis in integrity and in action, right? You can say one thing and how you act completely defines what it is that you actually believe. And so I think the second quality is a real question of integrity, right? I want to see more leaders whose actions are aligned with their speech and with their wisdom, right? And the wisdom component's the first one that we see through the illusion. And then the third thing I can say about what I think makes a good leader is they have to have people's sovereignty as one of the primary things on their agenda, right? Because there's so many things that are set up right now, once again, seemingly good, seemingly helpful. I veer on giving any specific examples, but there's lots, right? Here's one. This is one I've almost always had an issue about. Is education, right? Yes, I think education is one of the most powerful tools to liberate people. Now, when I look at our education system, it's arranged so that everyone gets an education, right? But it's not functioning well, and it's not helping people to stay stuck, because it's so rigid and et cetera. So really, I think if we designed a way to educate that had sovereignty, had liberation at the very forefront of it, it would look very different. And so this to me is the top three characteristics of new leaders. And I will say that for me, once again, I'm going to probably like keep reiterating this over and over again. The only way that people can have those qualities is if their energy is completely clear. Because we know this, and if you didn't listen to the last one we did, I talked all about energy. Right?
Go back and spend 90 minutes of your life deconstructing that one, people.
Right, so I'm not going to do it again, but I will say energy is everything. We all know this. It's what creates the physical world of form. So if you are not personally like making it your priority work to make sure your energy is 100% clear and healed, and those are two different things, I'll make that distinction, they have to have both. And if you're in this clearing and healing process, then I believe that you have the capacity to step up, right, and be someone who can guide other people to their own liberation.
Yeah, you hit those hearts, people. Hit those hearts. She deserves more than 4 hearts at this point. Come on, hit that heart. Yeah, there it is. It's going up. It's going up. Calls to action still work in the social media world. Now, here's the thing. The first thing that I wanted to say is when you open that school, I'm going to be your provost. All right? Because I do agree, because you know that I come from an education background, and one of the things that I speak up on now is the fact that I see education blanket statement as social control, right? Mm-hmm. Social control, right? It's meant to keep you at these sort of catabolic states of being, right? Which puts blinders on. So it's got the word of education is power in theory, but then when you come out, all these folks are graduating and they think there's only one way to live their life, and that's the grind that they were used to the 12 years that they were in the education system. So I am your provost. I am calling that identity right now.
You're hired.
The other thing is we could talk about clearing and healing if you want to go there for a second. I think one of the things that, and if there's certain people that you don't want to talk about, like Trump and stuff like that, we don't have to talk about him, but also at the same time, like I've come across a lot of, I'm going to use it 2 times if this were a drinking game, ostensibly, because I love how you laugh every time I say it.
Every time you say it.
I love how you laugh every time you say it. I say it. But I've come across a lot of people who and this is my choosing, in coming out of sort of the shrouded positive psychology, now mix it with spirituality realm, is I put a lot of faith. I didn't faith myself, but I put faith as a chip into their pocket, and just blindly kind of trusted spiritual leaders who happen to be in business, and realized that they themselves had probably gone through a wonderful process of going from status quo into the darkness and then coming back. But like you said with point number 1, their identity now is spiritual leader. I am woke. I am here. You eliminate your past, get rid of the trauma, clear out the energy. And now that you've cleared out the energy, let me fill it in with my trappings. Mm-hmm. So that you are now codependent on me. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And so the or how I'd, certain things would be said, and I'm like, wow, you don't know that you're quoting this person. Like there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it misdirection, but there's a lot of, you didn't say it, I did, neuropathy and sociopathy. That I see in some of the spiritualists, and one of the things that I struggled with is, so there's the spiritual person who can pull, right? But then there's the human person who's still human, right? And so like I still have to understand that, but then I for myself have to have a discerning eye, so that if I want to become a leader, I'm not holding on to anger towards them or resentment towards them for being human, and so I just wanted to throw that out, because like those identity traps there's like so many layers to it, because we're all trying to do the best that we can, given the illusion that the illusion that's just ahead of us. And some people have busted through those walls multiple times. Others are busting through it, maybe for the first recognized time that they're busting through it. And so there's this sort of network of care, but then I see this network of, I don't have great terms like you do, so like they're all loaded with judgment, but like network of like sleaziness, and like when we first started talking about spiritual path as business, that's what I'm really, really, really interested in, because I don't think that a lot of people are practicing do harm. I think they're practicing do no harm, but they're falling in tricks and traps.
Yes, this is why I wanted to talk to you about this.
Okay.
Even months ago, when we talked about talking about it, and I was like, I don't know what I have to say about this. But I have a sense now, because this is the work now, right? And it's like you said, it's another layer of getting through the illusion, right? And it's that illusion that, because I'm spiritual, then I'm doing good. Right? Like that in and of itself, like that's one, an identity. I'm a spiritual person. And then the other one is a judgment, whether it's a good judgment or a bad judgment, right? Still a judgment. And we're stuck. Then we're stuck again. So I'm so excited. But there's one really important thing I feel like I have to respond to in this, which is, I mean, there's many, but primary. I want to say I'm sorry to you, Intergalacto. I'm sorry for ever having made fun of you using the word ostensibly.
Why? Because I love when you make fun of me. Because like Lobersterbird becomes human when you do that.
Well, I'm attempting to become reverse human right now.
And I plan to keep saying it until it's in your third book. Like I'm going to be reading your third book, and ostensibly it's going to be in there.
Well, I might use this story as an example, because this is an example of what we're talking about. The reason I'm apologizing is because I made fun of you, and I wasn't telling you not to use it, right? Mm-hmm. But the reason I was making fun of you is because someone we had worked with had told you, like, not to use big words, right? Mm-hmm. And to, like, speak to, like, kind of, like, dumb it down so that people understand what you're saying. And I actually, like, I love that you use the word ostensibly and neuropathy and, like, stuff I can't even say, right? Because that's who you are, and I love that you've continued to do that despite people telling you, like, how to be, like, I really respect that, because that to me speaks to an authenticity, right? That's a critical part of integrity. And I think like you said, there's so many people, whether they're like, entrepreneur, like whether they're like coaches or whether they're mentors in the entrepreneur world, it's the same thing in the spiritual and the self-help world, It's like you were saying, there are people who are perpetuating the same energies, basically, right, that come back to this thing of oppression. And what you were saying about the education system, that's exactly what I mean when I say, we have this illusion of freedom, and we're still oppressed. They are letting us, get to a certain point where we feel like we understand things and have agency, and so that we can continue to be controlled, yes. Right? It's only like this point, and we need to get out of the box, right? We need to like get outside of the system, and that's what breaks my heart. Like, and this is what led me to stop talking on social media, or I wasn't writing, like I wasn't doing anything, because so many people were coming to me that were like devastated and heartbroken, and were like, I've spent like tens of thousands of dollars on this like spiritual, whatever, or this, like business path, and I'm not only not where I envisioned, but I'm kind of worse off, and they've lost like this trust and this faith, which to me was so heartbreaking. Like, I literally was on these calls and I was like, I can't help you then, Yeah. Like, because what I'm doing the same thing, and that's why I went in this dark night of the soul to be like, am I doing the same exact thing, right? And then I have to stop, until I'm certain that I'm not, and then I'll start again, or just stop. I'll go do something else. I could go garden or, something that would be more useful, than getting people more and more entrenched in the thing that is, preventing them from becoming free. So this is like the biggest trick and trap on the spiritual path. And so, as most of your listeners know, I do both. Like, I help people who are creative, to start their own businesses. And I also do it like through pilgrimage, right? Through, like, I think the two, they can't actually be separate anymore. Like, because we're just getting to the point where we're integrating everything, right? Yeah. So if we want to try to compartmentalize it, like, that's all good and fine, but like, it's going to integrate you somehow. That's the harder path.
Yeah. Well,
but
I mean, I think the status quo is no longer the human that's walking around embracing the fracturedness, right? There's this sort of holistic coming together that I don't want to say that it's universal, because I don't even know if I believe in universal truth. I think it's becoming a very individualistic thing as well. It's coming full circle now, but like there is something about the fracturedness, right? And so, like, a year ago, like, the idea of a lobster and a bird, blah 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 blah. Oh God, that was such a cute story, but like, no, all of a sudden, like, no, it's making sense, right? The true integration is the creation of a third space, one that's above the domains that we think that we have to live in, that have been pre-constructed for us, right? And those limitations sometimes are education. Those limitations are sometimes going and putting your trust into somebody, and coming out of it saying, okay, as a human, I'm kind of hurt, but also as someone who is committed to growth, this was an opportunity to really and profoundly expand and move forward, or move outwards. And so the thing is that the way that a lot of people are doing it is really almost by having people disavow everything they have and giving it to them, right? And so it doesn't quite make sense for them, for certain people to be at this massive loss right now, a massive loss, and it's hard because you're like, they're there and they're blaming these spiritual leaders. It's their fault. They took all my money. They took this. They took that. They made these promises. Well, we still have a personal accountability. But also at the same time, like, people need, you're right, leaders need to call this shit out. They need to call this shit out. They have a duty to serve, and so to leave certain people like scorched earth is really hard for me to comprehend right now. When you're taking what was fertile from them, sometimes these spiritual leaders would take what's fertile. And so I don't know if this is something that needs to be fixed. I don't know if this is some weird place that I am, but also at the same time, it's the conversation is more than just you and I right now. It's almost like you'll have the conversation. I'm sure you've had it. How many times have you gone into a conversation and they go, I'm so glad that you brought this up because this feels like so shady right now.
So much. It happens all the time.
Yeah. And so in many ways, this identity, the crisis of integrity and true sovereignty and liberation could be the compass that pulls us all back together, because it really feels like the Wild West right now. Because if you didn't, if you're the one who chose to give your money away, you're the one who, you're the one who didn't put the work in. It was you who didn't put the work in. Wow, that could really drive someone to psychotherapy at this point. And so, I'm not quite sure where we're going with this, but also at the same time, take me back, take me home tonight.
I don't want
to let you go.
I don't want to let you go into intergalactic. Totally. Yeah. Back down.
Pull intergalactic in.
Well, two things is that a lot of the people I talk to, so this is the first one, are in this process of awakening and exhibit a high level of awareness. So a lot of the people I talk to actually realize, like, they weren't pointing fingers and blaming. They were saying, like, I just understand how I've been doing this, so they took responsibility for it.
Right on.
but like everything, there's this fine line, right? There's
They're
this
hitting the love for you right now.
Oh, well, I love you all. Because probably you're probably some of the people I talk to, right? If you are, just be like, yep, we had this conversation, right? Um, People are, and the only way we're going to change any of this is if each one of us takes 100% responsibility for ourselves, right?
Yes.
And like you mentioned, there's this fine line. And so this is like, I'm really glad you brought this up because I was going to email you and be like, this is actually what I want to talk about today. And you already brought it up, right? There's two things. There's paradox and polarity. Okay. This is like my whole thing because when I started my business, my mission statement was like, I want to help all beings attain enlightenment. That was like my mission statement. And then I like went on this crazy ass journey and I was like, what's going on here? What does this have to do with anything? And I'm back to it. But I'm back to it with a newer understanding. And that has to do with this really like deeper level of seeing through the illusion, right? So one of the things is that there's paradox. We live in an entire world of paradox, right? Everything, like the fact that this all seems really real, like, it's a total paradox because it's all energy that's arising out of an emptiness, right? So in there, so I like to hashtag paradox alert. I do it to my heroes all the time, right? I'm about to say something, right, that is this and that at the same time and neither nor, right? It's just how it is. So part of it is becoming comfortable in that. And so you brought up what I often talk about and think about and live, which is this state of liminality, which Victor Turner, he was an anthropologist, and I believe he coined this term. And so there's these two different states, like lobster, bird, right? Seemingly two very different states, right? And when you can accept that there is a place where the two of those things can come together and not be one or the other, or either are, then you're existing in a state of liminality, right? And in that state, this is why I created The Bridge to Being, my podcast. It's an exploration of how we can be in that third state that you were talking about, because that state does exist, and that state is the state of all potential possibility.
As we have Jen Reed's paradox alert on the screen.
Thank you, Mermaid.
If we could just, if we could, every time you just give a paradox alert, if all phones could get, Lobersterbird is giving a paradox alert right now. Warn everyone. Before
I know. Well, really, I'll just throw up the hashtag. Maybe Mermaid Jen can.
Mermaid Jen.
Hi, I love you, Mermaid. So here's the power. This is why I like to throw out paradox alerts so people can see them and just rest in them for a second. Like, right? Can we just rest in the fact that if I hold on to something as being lobster and I hold on to something as being bird, then they're in these fixed states, right? But if somehow there's this space where they can come together and become something else, the something else is as yet unformed. Right? It's like not a thing yet. Like, and I call myself a lobsterbird because that's the closest thing to a description as I can have to unformed thing in this other dimension of liminality, right? Because it's not a thing. Like, there is no other lobsterbird on the planet. Like, it's actually not a thing. And I don't actually look like a lobster bird had a baby necessarily. And in that space is where I create everything. So, you talked about all the stuff I'm creating, like the TV show, Modern Magic, and like the podcast and all the success I've had. And like, yeah, they're external things. I've only ever created them by existing in this space that pretty much has nothing to do with any of that stuff, right? With any of those external monikers or anything, right?
Right.
Most and so this is the thing is that most business coaches, so just to give you an example of paradox alert, is like most business coaches would say do one thing, right? Niche down, like focus on one thing, focus all your energy on one direction. And like quite frankly, like I believed that for a while. People that I trust and that's true. And that is good for some people, right? So you were talking about truth. I think it's really important that we come to a new conversation of what is truth, because I think that you're right, Intergalacto, is that there is no one universal truth. There's a multi-dimension of multi-dimensional truths, which each one of us embody. And all we have to do is hold space for that. Like, because you have a truth that isn't someone else's truth doesn't make theirs an untruth. We got to get to that third space. Like, this is a truth for this person, and this is a truth for this person. And even though, like, a lobster and a bird don't really seem like those two truths can coexist, they do in this third space of liminality.
And what I love about that is that the practice becomes embracing controversy with civility, right? Because in many ways, the truth that somebody sees will try to be impressed on somebody else, and it's because that's all they ever. That's the limitation of what they know, you know.
Right.
And so it's not like that's all you know, poor you. But it's seriously, we're all on this sort of seeking, searching journey, and we've taken in all this data. Call it awareness, whatever you want to call it, right? And there's still even more, and I love the idea that paradox is probably the place where you find the truth, right? I think, you know, just on an even simpler level, when it comes to my social identities, right? Like Filipino, American, right? And I would code switch between the two depending on what company I was around, what the context was, right? More Filipinos, well then Filipino values mark came out. More Americans, well the redheaded guy comes out, right? Where in true reality, like there's a third space for Mark, intergalactic Mark to be, right? And it's all of those things and joy, revolution, right? Like all these other things going on, right? So like I love that idea of paradox. Now, holy shit, it's 12:50.
Oh my God.
This is why we went 90 last time. Polarity.
We have to do the second one. The second one's the most important, so maybe it's the ender. It's
Yeah, okay.
polarity.
Okay.
You have to talk about it.
Yes, absolutely.
I will not let you hang up this Skype.
We're not hanging up. We are not hanging up. I actually did not book anything at 1 because I was like, just in case. If there's ever one that we let go over. Yeah, but let's talk about this polarity idea. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I would just say in response to that is how I became a lobsterbird in the first place, right? I grew up in a liminal space. My mother is Asian and my father is white. And like you said, I was constantly like switching back and forth.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, like I was like, wait a second, like aren't they both me? Or not? You know, like where is there space for that? You know, like where is the space? And I wasn't seeing it, you know, and again, talk about leadership, you know, in particular, like in media and in the kind of leaders, you know, that were in any kind of position, you know, growing up, especially like were on the internet all the time, right? I didn't see examples of people who were anything mostly other than white, actually, sorry. But, you know, like, I remember Connie Chung was like the first Asian lady, but then she was Asian, right? And it's like, she's Asian, and that became a big deal.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
White, like there was no liminal space anyway. So that's why I created my own. And I think that that's part of the work for all of us, right? Is to understand the spaces and experience and the knowledge that we have and really letting go of the attachment to turning it into a thing. Right? And being able to see that if it has that one thing, then inherently it has the other thing. So this brings me to point 2, which is polarity. And the reason I have to talk about this is because I realize that this is the key, I think, to my mission statement, which is all beings attaining enlightenment, is transcending the false polarity matrix that we are living in right now. This is part of the illusion, right? Is that polarity even exists. But if you look all around you, it is perpetuated all the time. And what I've come to realize is that I do think it's intentional. Like I do believe that for the people that have money, power, and control right now, it's intentional that we believe things are a certain way or another way. And so like you said, I'm not going to talk about Trump because actually it's not him. Like he's a figurehead for some other show, I think, that's keeping people distracted from like actually doing, right, like the real work and actually being concerned with like, where are these things in me, you know, like that are causing this, like, you know, circus.
I'm just gonna fill in. I just think that whole thing is the ultimate trickster.
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah.
on multiple layers, like trickster
Yeah.
from the standpoint of pulling out what's the best in you, but also there's a sort of deception going on there. It's like, like squirrel. And then all of a sudden, all this work is being done around here, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Hey, someone gave me a heart for that.
Yeah.
Aww. One of the 54 hearts Mark gets. 53 to Lobsterbird. Okay.
Oh, you have my heart. What more could you?
Oh, and it was Lobsterbird hitting the heart. Thank you. Oh, thank you, sister. But no, talk about this idea of false polarity.
So this is I think this is the next portal we have to go through in order to get to like the next kind of like stage. And like my book is Level Up, right? It is kind of like a video game. We have both co-created and are
Totally
playing.
a video game.
It's totally a video game. And so, there is no like hierarchy of levels, but in terms of video games, right? Like Super Mario like goes into the little tube and then comes out, right? Into a new dimension. Right, we're leveling up to a new dimension. Like, hopefully,
how did she get 3 loves for saying Super Mario?
Who doesn't love Nintendo?
I've got to drop the like heaviest thing that I can think about. Ostensibly. Nope, they don't love the ostensibly. Only you do. But anyways, but Super Mario does. He goes through the pipe.
Yep.
Shows up in a totally different dimension. Right?
With superpowers, with like he's able to throw fire and shit.
He is.
You and I are a little bit like Mario and Luigi.
Where is this going, Bird?
We're in a new game. Here's the new game. Let's wake people up real quick. Okay, ready? Let's finish the game right now.
Let's do it. Yeah, that's the game. I like it. It's like the last minute when the music starts going really fast and you get nervous.
Yeah, we're climbing the flagpole.
Okay, we're getting our shit back together.
I know, because don't even get me started on mushrooms. They have a big role to play.
Oh my god! The truth is out. Bird's been on a 1-year trip on ayahuasca and mushrooms.
Oh my gosh, no, I don't even want to paint that picture because I have a whole other thing about that and people trying to find their own self-realization through the abuse of plant medicine. Don't even get me started.
Bird, we're gonna have to have a continuing series.
We are. I
Bird
love this.
show.
The intergalactic
or
bird.
Mario Luigi. But
okay. Yeah, reining it back in, right? Polarity. This is like the closing. Like we're about to save the princess from the castle, and y'all out there who are listening, like you all, like you're both the princess, and we're also the princess, and so is everybody in the world. She's a metaphor. Is this polarity thing, right? So there is all of these ideas that we have about things, and I was thinking about this earlier, actually. So there's different levels, and I'm going to throw out a bunch of terms from Buddhism, actually, but I'm like kind of extracting them from their Buddhist, like construct. So none of the Buddhists get too serious, and none of the non-Buddhists get too serious at this. But there are words like preferences, judgment, attachment, rejection. Let's just start with those, okay? So like we have preferences, right? Because we live in a world where things appear a certain way. And so some of them are more pleasing, right, to us, and some of them are unpleasant. And we develop our preference, right? And inherently there's nothing wrong with preferences. But it's when we make a judgment about it, right? So for example, I know someone who likes bugs, but like certain kinds of bugs, and like other bugs, she's like, no, I don't like that kind of bug. Like, absolutely not. And I'm like, but you like this weird bug here, right? And there's like,
it's like my preference for Starburst candy flavors. I will not eat the pink ones. I only eat the red ones and the yellow ones.
Right, and that's fine until it becomes a judgment, until you're like, no, the yellow ones are shit and they're made of chemicals.
And that's what the problem is. I do deface the yellow ones.
Right. And or like the cockroach, then you're like, okay, all these weird ass bugs are fine, but the cockroach is dirty. That's a judgment, right? Carries disease, judgment. Like so do those other bugs probably, or maybe they don't. Maybe that's a whole judgment about bugs. Anyway, we've gotten, right? Now we're in judgment. And once we're in judgment, we are not in equanimity. We're not in peace. We're not in clear seeing, and then we can't act clearly, right? But then there's other layers of it, which are our attachments, right? So then we could get attached, right, to those red starbursts, right? And
Yep.
I'm like, I have to have them now. And now everything I do, right, like when I go to the store, if I don't get the red starburst, then my day is ruined and I can't do my Golden Mike episode, right? And then like, but we do that with stuff. Like
We
that's a
do.
stupid example.
It's
But we do
not a
that with
stupid example. I mean, look how many people separate the M&Ms on their contracts, like, so like, yeah, there are, and if they don't get them, they throw the shit fits. So,
exactly. They
yeah,
destroy the room, right?
yeah,
Yeah. And then there's rejection, right? Which is that, no, I like can't possibly, like if I eat a yellow one, right? Like it's going to taste bad. Like I'm just not doing it, right? And so what this does is basically like all of the reasons why those happen are actually based in this concept of polarity, right? That things are good and bad, that there is dark and light, right? That things are like high and low. Like, yeah, they appear that way. They do appear that way to our perception. But when we get stuck in that trap and then we turn it into this whole other thing, this is why judgment, this is why attachment, this is why aversion is really, it's a tricky road to go down. Because once you're down that road, you are out of that space of, of beingness that we talked about before. You're already out, right? And so it's really hard. This is like my new challenge in life is because for me, the next level up is getting out of this polarity thinking because it's what's causing a lot of the issues in the first place. Like, so long as I think like me and you, like two different beings, like, or us and them, we're already stuck in the polarity and we're never going to get out of it, right? And that's basically how like every war has been fought, right? That's how every like political office has been gained, right? That's how any even of like the spiritual teachers that you were, talking about, they're doing spiritual teachings from polarity
us
consciousness.
versus them. Yep.
Yeah, and you can't like we got to get out of polarity consciousness, and you said this word earlier, which is another Buddhist word, and it's the word that I keep using is discernment. Right, is wise discernment. And in the realm of, because what's amazing about this time, we have access to so much, like remember back in your past lives when like there was no internet and there was no airplanes and like there was no boats. And if you want to find a spiritual teacher, you had to walk like thousands of kilometers, like up in the Himalayas to find some weird dude in a cave, right? Like it was hard and we didn't have access to that much, but it's kind of similar. Now you're walking through the Himalayas is finding a spiritual teacher, right? Who is like in the cave, right? Like metaphorically, not part of the system. Right now, because they're everywhere, we can tune into anyone, but there are very few people out there. And this is true for any field, business, entrepreneurship, spirituality, self-help, politics, like doctors, like the field of medicine, education, right? There are few people. And I really feel that we have to use such discernment about who we align with. Right, especially if we are on a path really like to our own awareness and our own awakening and our own like clearing of our own energies and the things that have been holding us back and keeping us stuck in the illusion. Like we have to have that much of a discerning eye. And again, that's not a judgment. That's not to say like, oh, this person's in polarity consciousness. Fuck them, right? Like, that's not the point either. But just to say, to like, because, and I'll just say this one more time, and then I feel like I get to climb the pole and slap the flag, right? Is that I actually for a long time was unwilling to look that deeply because, and it came from a fundamental, and so this is, I want to like expose this basically, and I feel like people who are worth listening to like are able, right, to see in themselves and then not try to hide it and like put up, this is why we were talking about your identity before, right? Like the joke, I love that you can let go of that and you can take it up again whenever you want, right? But you can let go of it. And that's really important because so much of it is presentation. Like people paint a picture of what they want you to see. And this is all the time. I mean, this is what Level Up, my book, is about, right? And there's nothing wrong with it inherently, again, not right or wrong, outside of the polarity. It's a part of the functioning, right, of what happens. And some people are doing it intentionally, right, like you were saying, for money, right, for fame, for whatever reasons, these energies that we didn't really get to talk about. We'll have to do another one. But they're operating under the surface. And a lot of times I think they don't even know, you know. But from my side, I did not look that deeply into people, into opportunities, into teachings that were being transmitted to me because I really wanted to believe that everyone, we were in it, together, and that everyone was doing it for the greatest and highest good, right? That everyone's energy was clear, because I do believe inherently we are all enlightened. The only thing that's blocking us from having realized it in this moment are what the Buddhists call obscurations, right? They're like clouds blocking the sun. The
Yep.
suns are inherent, enlightened nature, right? And just because the clouds are there doesn't mean the
Yep.
sun isn't there. The
Yep.
sun's still there. We just can't see it, right? And right now we have some things blocking us, and that's why it's so important to do it energetically. But one of the things that was blocking me came from a real wound and a real crack within myself, like where I also had this thing where I was stuck in the polarity of good and bad, and in reference to myself, like, and I went back through all these layers, like, of both my life, and then this is the part about clearing. You have to go through past lives and ancestrally, like, it's a whole process, and I'm not finished by any
Yep.
means. Right? But I can now see, like, how pervasive it is, and how, because I thought there was good and bad, I thought that meant that I could be good or bad. And if I could be good, then I had the potential to be bad. And am I bad? Right? Or like, but for a long time I denied looking at that, and I denied looking at it on other people. And so what happened then in my life was that I just wanted to believe everyone, because I wanted to believe for myself that I was good. Right? And so I wanted to
Wow.
believe that about everyone, right? It's like crazy deep. Like,
Yeah.
when I realized this, I was like, whoa. And just through, like, not just, it's a huge thing. By busting through that polarity and realizing that that doesn't exist, but watching all the different ways in my life that's played out, all the different emotions it's caused, all the different things I've created, all the different stories I've told, right? And we got to go back. We got to, like, in order to clear it, you got to go back to the source, and it goes back beyond this life, right? It's embedded in us genetically,
Yeah.
and it's embedded in us karmically, right? So we have to clear it on these levels. Well, my point is that we can't possibly do it. It's like, this is attributed to Einstein. I don't know. You can probably tell me if he really said this, but we can't. It's a definition of insanity, right? Is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, we can't create, like, we can't level up if we're not willing, right, to be able to see it, to be able to do this work, right, and to really, on a deep level, like, deeply, 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 get out of the polarity.
Yeah.
Like, that is for sure, like,
Yeah.
what's keeping us.
He followed that up by, sorry to cut you off. He followed that up by saying, we also can't solve any issues by staying on the same energetic level that we're currently at. We have to
Right.
change the energy level to be able to solve, or to be able to evolve, whatever you want to call that, any of those issues. I mean, the dude was one of the most brilliant spiritual teachers ever. Now, I wanted to, I think, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but like, our mutual friend, Tamara Arnold, right, had me on her show, and she called me out because she had heard enough of my stories and had timeline pieced it together that there was a 10-year dark period where I was
Mm.
off the grid. And so I talked about life up to a moment, and then I talked about showing up 10 years later, kind of like Jesus. Suddenly he's 40, right? So, but as you're saying this, I feel compelled to share in service the one of the reasons why I think that happened, and it's this notion of I was buying into polarity, right? And so at the time I was doing pranic healing, and it was very similar to Reiki, for those of you who have not heard of pranic healing. And now you Reiki masters might call me out. Like, it's not the shame, quote, but it was an internal thing that I was doing, very critical of it, 'cause here I am, like, what is the scientific technology of what's going on with this, suddenly I just started trusting the process. Gray things started showing up around people. Those gray things started turning into colors, and it was a beautiful thing. And then one day I saw that energy but not attached to anybody.
Mm.
Something had made itself present to me, and it was huge, and it was good. and it was kind. And suddenly my Catholicism made all the years of just practicing faith made sense.
Mm.
And I said to myself, this is amazing. And I don't care whether this is scientific or not. This is absolutely amazing. And then I went home and I said, if something that amazing exists, then something just as opposite exists and is trying to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or maybe that thing is trying, that's that good, is trying to save me from myself, which is inherently bad. Like, I had all these thoughts about what is good and bad and where do I fall and what is this Marvel Infinity War that's going on in the unseen world, right? And I went off the grid with that. I said, I'm going to school, and if it's not in the textbook, I'm not believing it. Because I don't want to know what the bad is. And I think it was the polarity that was going through me. And I think in terms of why this is a very, like, it feels very personal because it's just you and I right now, not on a Facebook show, but it's Mark and Sophia talking, like, and I think that's why people like you are in my life now, Sophia, is because I'm coming back and I'm ready to hear something like, Cordone, it was just the illusion of polarity.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't run from anything. That's the best that you knew at the time. And because of that, you've helped me take judgment off of myself for being like, oh, I should have known better. Like, what a ignorant way of thinking, No, that's all I ever knew was black, white, good guy, bad guy. Like, it was always this sort of idea of polarity, and so that's what I appreciate the most is as, people are continuing with their lunches, they might find this in some replay. But I know this it's just you and me being able to tell stories right now. I do appreciate that. And there was a time that, there's people watching, they're hitting the love button. But there are a lot of people living in polarity right now. And I do think that that's where you hit the flagpole is once and like go upwards or downwards, whatever the hell happens when the fireworks goes off. I think that is something that is completely going to disrupt the way that I proceed with my next intergalactic year, is this idea of how we get stuck in a very, very real feeling polarity model, So that's just a thank you and acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for exposing yourself. I mean, I also have gone off the grid for a very long, like probably around the same time. Mm-hmm. Like it sounds like we have had a similar path in that regard. But I really appreciate that you can really, like be honest about that and also be willing to drop the polarity. And so you don't have to be in that space of judgment anymore. That's the space of like what, we're talking about our path and how it might not have gone the way, like we wanted it to, or this coming back full circle, right? Like when I looked over my whole path, I thought like, oh, was that a detour? Like instead of judging ourselves for that, like that's more being in the polarity, right? That we did something good or bad. Right? So that was right or wrong. Yeah. And to be out of that, that's really like, because the thing about polarity is if you're not like swinging to either pole, right, then you're in this space in the center. And I often think about it like, I've done this movement before, but this is a different one. I used to do a wormhole, right?
Tutting?
You take out and you hop over. But now we're going to talk about how once you get out, if these are the polarities, my wrist, right? And you come across and you're in this space, you're in this state of balancing. And once again, just like woke, right? There's no balance. There's no like static, like state, like I am balanced. Like that's just another identity, right? But then we're in this really fertile state of balancing, right? And you can just be, this is the space that we can be in. Once again, it's creating that third space that transcends the duality. And like as far as Buddhism goes, like that's the whole name of the game, right? Is getting beyond duality. If you can get beyond duality, you get to the realization of the essence of how everything works and operates, right? And it's not just like words, it's not go beyond duality, right? But your story tells me that you have experienced glimpses of that, like that you're kind of experiencing one right now as you tell me that, right? And this is what I mean. It's really powerful because when you're in that state of beingness, if in the being in the balancing, you're in that third state, you're in that liminal state. And like I said before, that is the place of all potential creation. That's the most powerful place you can be in. And that's why most of the world is not set up to facilitate you getting to that space, right? Or like existing in that space. That's also not a static space either, right? But it's not. It's set up to keep you stuck in these two other polarities. So you're constantly like playing out this little war and thinking that you're getting somewhere where you're not, right? Like instead of actually like leaving it all together. Like that is the place of power. And in terms of leaders, people need to like be able to know, like they need to be people that can exist in that space. Right. So that's like my whole new purpose. When you talked about purpose, is really helping the people that I believe are this next generation. And it has nothing to do with age. Right. It doesn't matter if you're a millennial or if you're 80. Right. But across all the spectrum, there's people that are stepping up and there's people just know, you are here, right, to help. And you're here for a reason. And so like, let's get to the place where we can exist in that space where we can actually really affect change, where we can actually help. Right. And we can be in this like transcendent space together and create a whole new world.
Wow.
That.
She drops it with an Aladdin reference. Okay, so you are truly, truly, truly. I wouldn't call it unbelievable because you exist, so it's believable. So like,
I'm in the liminal state of believable and unbelievable. Yay!
Yes, you are ostensibly unbelievable.
Ding! Third time's a charm.
I have, and that's it. That's the trifecta right there. I look forward to moments like this where I can have these conversations with you, Sophia, and I very much appreciate it. I'm going back into my character now, and we'll have you back on the show. The show notes definitely have an amazing link to your book. Thank you for sharing that book with us. For the sake of consistency. Oh, wait. For the sake of consistency, we're going to do two things. If you're feeling hopeful, give us a wow face. Okay, and then number two, the Lobsterbird, there is a golden microphone coming down from your ceiling right now that translates across the world, translates into every language, amplifies out into this multiverse. Every sentient being is listening to what it is that you have to say, and maybe a few of them need to hear right now. When I hit the golden mic, Lobsterbird, you are on the golden mic live now.
I choose to say nothing. I choose to be.
I can't think of a more fitting way to end it. This has been Intergalactic Cordone and Lobsterbird 159. Yeah, they're hitting that love button. They're hitting that love button. Episode 159. We have one final question for you. If you're living happily and you're living with full meaning and purpose, what is your responsibility to change our history for the better? This is the Golden Mic. We're signing off.